Hi, I'm Lisa from Australian travel and migration blog dreamingofdownunder.com. And today I'm going to talk about the differences between Sydney and Perth. I've lived in Sydney since 2016 and I spent 5 months living in Perth when I first moved to Australia before I travelled the south coast. Perth seems to be a really popular place for British people to move to in particular, so I thought it might be useful to go through some of the reasons you may or may not want to live there, as well as how it compares to Sydney. I've also got blog posts on lifestyle in Sydney and Perth, so I'll link those below if you want to learn more about those cities. I've also got a free Australian city comparison chart that you can sign up for. So here are my top 11 differences between Sydney and Perth. My first difference between Sydney and Perth is the weather. Sydney and Perth are on opposite coastlines, so they're around 4,000 kilometres apart. Sydney is slightly further south, but they do have quite different climates. Both of them have quite cool winters compared to the more northern parts of Australia, like Queensland. In the daytime, it averages around 16 to 18 degrees, and overnight it's about 8 degrees. Perth's winters are wetter than Sydney's, with around 13 days of rain a month, compared to only about 7 or 8 in Sydney. Sydney winters are usually cool but really clear, so it's great for things like hiking. In the summertime, Perth's quite a bit hotter than Sydney. Sydney tends to be around 26 degrees in the daytime, whereas Perth tends to be about 32 degrees, so it's pretty hot. Overnight, they're quite similar temperatures though. Sydney's summers are a bit wetter than Perth. Sydney has around 9 days of rain a month on average in the summer, whereas Perth only has about 2. Sydney is a more humid place than Perth, particularly in the summertime, so even if it's only low or mid-20s, it can still be really sticky and uncomfortable. Perth has a much drier heat. When I left Perth in late November, which is just before summertime, we'd already had a few days that were over 40 degrees, so it was like stepping outside in front of a giant hairdryer. Also, Sydney has about double the volume of rain per year than Perth, so when it rains in Sydney, it really rains torrentially. A plus point for Perth though is that it has the most sunny days per year than any other Australian capital. It also is meant to be the sunniest city in the world based on the number of hours of sunshine per year. Western Australia doesn't have daylight savings, whereas New South Wales does, which means that in the summertime, Perth gets dark a bit earlier than Sydney, about 45 minutes earlier, and the sun sets around 7:30. In the winter though, Perth stays lighter a little bit longer than Sydney for about half an hour. My third difference is property prices. I think this is one of the main reasons that expats choose to move to Perth. Perth is one of the most affordable capital cities in Australia in terms of property. Only Darwin is cheaper, and Sydney property is on average about double the price of Perth. The median property price in Perth at the end of December 2021 was only $529,000, whereas in Sydney it was $1.1 million, and that's for a combination of houses and flats or units. Because of COVID and people relocating to the beaches, Sydney's property has shot up by about 29% per year over 2021, which is a record, I think. The growth is slowing now, but it's still obviously very unaffordable. Difference number 4 is the size. Sydney is Australia's largest city and it has about 5.5 million people, whereas Perth is Australia's 4th largest city and it only has about 2.2 million people. Perth definitely feels much smaller. The CBD or city centre is a lot more compact and it's a lot easier to sort of walk around and drive around. I remember leaving Perth to go on my big road trip, and as soon as I got on the freeway it was just totally clear, and I was used to English motorways which are usually full of lorries, so it seemed really strange. Sydney's a lot bigger and busier than Perth, but it is very diverse in terms of the landscape, so you've got a bit more choice about what sort of area that you might want to live in and maybe finding somewhere that suits you. Difference number 5 is new versus old. Perth does have some really nice old buildings like the Town Hall, but in general I think it has quite a new, shiny, modern look compared to Sydney. Sydney and Melbourne tend to have a lot of older buildings and character and feel a bit more historic, whereas Perth, similarly to Brisbane, feels a bit more kind of modern and new. Difference number 6 is the location and isolation. Sydney is on the east coast of Australia, which is by far the most developed and populated. So if you go down the south coast and southeast coastline, you've got Cairns, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and you've got Tasmania off the coastline of Melbourne. So Sydney is kind of halfway down. So in terms of going on holiday and visiting other cities and places on the east coast, it's a really quick flight to go up and down, or you can just go on a long drive. Perth, on the other hand, is on the west coast of Australia, which is much more undeveloped, and it's known as the most isolated city in the world. The nearest other Australian capital city is Adelaide, which is around a 30-hour drive away. I travelled between Perth and Adelaide, and I spent 5 weeks on that trip because it was so long. If you wanted to fly to Brisbane to go on holiday in Queensland, it's a 5-hour flight from Perth. So from Perth you can't just nip across to Queensland or somewhere for a quick holiday. It's actually quicker to fly to Bali, so if you want to go to Indonesia, or if you're heading to Southeast Asia or anywhere west, that will be closer for you. It'll also shave a few hours off your flight if you're heading back to the UK for a visit. Difference number 7 is nearby holiday destinations. Both Perth and Sydney have lots of really lovely places to visit and go on holiday nearby. Even though Perth is isolated, it's still on the coastline, and it is a really beautiful coastline. If you drive a couple of hours south of Perth, you've got Busselton, which is a lovely holiday town with really bright white beaches and turquoise water. You've got lots of other holiday towns like Dunsborough and Yallingup on the way down. Then you've got Margaret River, which is a big surfing town with lots of wineries, and it's famous for really nice foods. If you continue to follow the coastline from Perth south down to the southwest, you've got really beautiful ancient forests in Pemberton, then you've got lovely forests and beach areas in Denmark and Albany. You can carry on to Esperance and Bremer Bay. You've got really amazing white beaches there. So there really is a lot between Perth and the Nullarbor. A lot of people say, oh, there's nothing there, it's just desolate, but it's not. It is quite populated, and there's a lot of places to go on holiday. Sydney also has a huge amount of nearby holiday places. If you go south from Sydney, you've got the Royal National Park, then you've got Wollongong, which is a beach city with a really nice green escarpment behind it. You can carry on to Kiama, which is a lovely green holiday place. Then about 3 hours south of Sydney is Jervis Bay, which is known as the Whitsundays of New South Wales. It's supposed to have the whitest sand in the world, and it's got loads of amazing beaches. Going north from Sydney, you've got the Central Coast, which has quite a tropical holiday feel. That's got lots of lovely beaches and a national park and walks. Then you can go up to Newcastle, which is a big city with beaches as well. Then you've got Port Stephens. There's really lots and lots on the coastline from Sydney. If you go inland, Sydney, you've got the Blue Mountains and then country towns, whereas Perth, if you go inland, you do have some forests, but then you're going to hit desert and outback a lot sooner than you would in Sydney. Difference number 8 is the beaches. Both Perth and Sydney are known for having really fantastic beaches, so either of those are a great choice if you're a beach lover. Perth has really big flat white beaches with quite fine sand, whereas Sydney has more kind of coarse golden sand, and Sydney's a very hilly place, so normally at the end of each beach you'll have a big sandstone headland and it looks more kind of rugged and craggy than Perth does. Sydney has over 100 beaches, so there's absolutely loads to choose from. Perth has 19, but it's still a small city, so it's still a pretty good choice. One thing Sydney has that I don't think Perth does is ocean pools, so you normally get a section of the ocean at the end of the beach walled off so that it's a calm area for swimming laps. Difference number 9 is the nightlife. I don't really go out to bars anymore, but when I visited Sydney in my 20s, I really thought the nightlife was brilliant, and there's a lot of choice. You've got the city, you've got King's Cross, you've got Darling Harbour, you've got Newtown, you've got a really big array of nightclubs and bars and whatever you're into really. Perth, on the other hand, is a much smaller city, so there's less choice. I did go to a few backpacker bars when I got there, which were okay, but generally I found it had a bit of a more sort of cheesy small town feel than the big clubs in Sydney. I remember one nightclub in Perth having a sign outside that said no mullets or face tattoos, and I genuinely did see quite a few mullets in Perth and some full face tattoos. Difference number 10 is the general prettiness of the city. I think Sydney and Perth have the prettiest CBDs or city centres of all the cities in Australia. Perth's shopping area is fairly generic, you could be anywhere in Australia really, but it has a really lovely riverside area in the city. You've got Langley Park, which runs along the water's edge, and that's got a running and cycle track, which is great, and a road that's got really tall palm trees lining it, and it looks like somewhere in California or something. From there you can see the city's skyline really well, and it's amazing at sunset and when all the lights come on in the city. You've got bars on the waterfront, and you've got Kings Park as well, which is really elevated, so you get amazing views across the whole city and of the Swan River. Also, the best thing in Perth is they have dolphins in the river right by the city, and I couldn't believe that when I first got there. I saw them probably most times I went to the river. It was really, really amazing. Sydney also has a really lovely city area on the water, so Sydney Harbour is absolutely huge. You don't really realise how big it is until you get there and see it. The Opera House looks amazing, the Harbour Bridge looks amazing, it's all really iconic. If you cross the bridge as well to the north side of Sydney, you get really lovely views of the skyline and Opera House, really nice sunsets. Sydney Harbour even has beaches as you head towards the ocean from the city. So even though Perth is much smaller than Sydney, it is still pretty. So I think both of them are fairly even on that point. Also, the water in both cities seems to be really blue, whereas a lot of the other cities, they're set on rivers, but it's quite brown water. My final difference, number 11, is the safety. I personally feel like Sydney is a safer city to walk around at night. I feel a bit safer. Obviously, both cities will have good and bad suburbs, so you need to do your research. But in terms of the general kind of inner city area and walking around, I just feel a bit safer in Sydney. I felt like Perth had more people kind of drunk or on drugs. Perth seemed to have quite a lot more adverts on TV for drug addiction and domestic abuse. I don't know if that's just because they tend to tackle it more or it happens more, I'm not really sure. Once in Perth, a really drunk man in the daytime just sort of fell off a bus and landed on my back, and I panicked and threw him on the floor. I think he was all right though. And my flatmate in Perth did night shifts in a hospital because she was a nurse, and she used to hate walking home from the bus about 5 in the morning just because there'd be quite a lot of people shouting on the streets and stuff. It's not like that everywhere, but I would definitely say more so than in Sydney. That's it for my differences between Sydney and Perth. I hope that was useful if you're planning to move to Australia. Let me know in the comments if you're planning on moving over here, or if you've got any other points that you think I've missed. Don't forget to check out my blog posts that I'll link below on living in Sydney and Perth, as well as downloading my free city comparison chart if you're trying to choose where to live in Australia. Please like and subscribe for more videos on life in Australia. Thanks for watching. If you continue to follow than Perth's with around 9 days of rain a month compared to only about 2 in Perth.